Hi, so today I'm going to talk about the Australian Child Maltreatment study. This is a study that was completed this year in April 2023. So it's a very recent study. And full disclosure, I am really excited about it and I'm talking about it to anyone who will listen. It's an informative study about issues that I have been talking about. It's very recent, so obviously very relevant to, I guess, some of these issues in recent times. And yeah, I just like that it gives us stats about some of the things I've been talking about. So I'm really happy. It's validating. You guys probably saw a study that went viral from an American university a couple months ago that spoke about emotional abuse being more detrimental to mental health and physical health as sexual abuse. And I guess the reason why it went viral, it's possibly because people expected that it's physical abuse and not emotional abuse that was much more detrimental. So, this particular Australian child maltreatment study is a similar study that was done within the context of Australia. 8,500 people of ages 16 to over 65 participated in this study. So, a huge amount of number with across various ages participated. I will provide a link to this study for anyone who wants to read on it a bit more. It has very interesting, I guess, findings. Yeah, and I'll go straight into it. So, of course, the study starts by defining what child maltreatment is, which is physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and exposure of domestic violence to children when they're growing up, which from a previous video, I talk about it causing childhood trauma. The study continued to say that this child maltreatment issue is a public health concern because it causes health risky behaviors like smoking, drinking, things that are quite detrimental for our physical illness, as well as mental health problems. So, this is why it's classified as a public health issue. Um, so, of course, it did find that mistreating children was found to have negative effects during children's childhood across their life and in between various generations. As I said, there was a wide variety of ages that participated within the study, and it noted that child maltreatment is endemic, meaning that it's very, very common. So the study, give you some stats now. The study found that 32% of the participants who were involved with this study reported to have experienced physical abuse when they were children, 32%. This is almost one in every three people. And physical abuse in the questions was defined by hitting, kicking, um, choking, being punched, being burned. That was very interesting. So 28.5% reported to have experienced sexual abuse, 30.9% reported to have experienced emotional abuse, which was patterns of behavior whereby a child was denied emotional support, emotional connection, there was verbal hostility, a child was name called, and mean things were said to them. So that was emotional abuse. 39.6% of people reported to have been exposed to domestic violence, which again, as I've said in previous video, is witnessing a parent being physically or emotionally abused. So that's almost 40% of people who've witnessed domestic violence in their childhood. Something I found very interesting was that of these figures that I've mentioned, 30%, almost 40% for domestic violence, only 3% of that population had child protection authorities involvement. So this is particularly interesting for me because having worked within the child protection system, I find that generally in the general public, there is a sense that child maltreatment, child abuse, whatever you want to call it, neglect, things like that, there's a sense that it doesn't apply to me, applies to certain types of families. Well, this study busts that myth. There is 40%, 30 something percent, lots of those 30 percentage, and only 3% of those of that population get child protection involvement intervention. So DCP only knock at um, Department for Child Protection knock at just 3% of these people. So meaning that it's much more common than we want to admit. And to be honest, I don't think that the child protection system will be able to manage such need and be able to respond to that amount of, I guess, issues. Therefore, it's up to us to correct what's going wrong. The other thing that the study found was that most people experience multiple types of these maltreatments. So I'll give an example here. So, for example, the study found that if a child was exposed to domestic violence, which is, as I mentioned, it's classified as its own child abuse. If a child is exposed to domestic violence, they were also experiencing emotional abuse as well as physical abuse at the same time. So, lots of people are experiencing multiple types of these abuses. There's more in the study if you want to read on that. They also found that in cases where multiple types of abuses occurred, um, a lot of the people within the household, whether it's parents, caregivers, also experience mental health issues, alcohol and drug dependency. There were financial issues. There was also even parental separation or divorce, which also would have had ongoing conflict in there. And also, something to possibly note is that the issue of violence, domestic violence, the issue of alcohol and substance use and mental health issues do intersect a fair bit when it comes to child abuse or child maltreatment. So it's possible that it's common for if there's alcohol and drug use, there's possibly mental health issues in there, and it's possible that a child is being a child is experiencing abuse. So this is the part that went viral. So this Australian child maltreatment study found that people who experienced child maltreatment had 2 or 3 times higher chances of experiencing mental health problems. 2 or 3 times higher chances of experiencing mental health problems. And I think we kind of generally know that, right? And it also found a big association that all these forms of child maltreatment, the physical, the emotional, the sexual abuse, the neglect, the exposure to domestic violence, they had similar effects on a person's mental health. However, something that came up very strongly than the other, I guess, observations was that the associations to mental health mental health issues later in life, was stronger on people who had experienced sexual abuse and emotional abuse as children. And the reason why they stood out, your guess is as good as mine. It's potentially because emotional abuse in our society is so rampant. Um, you know, we see it all the time, every day. You know, whether it's within our lives, we have possibly experienced denial of emotional support and connection, and emotional invalidation, a lack of a nurturing caregiver, verbal hostility from caregivers, and name calling and people saying mean things to us. And again, when you experience these things over extended periods of time, when you experience emotional abuse for extended periods of times in families, within your relationship with parents and stuff like that, it becomes very common, and you adopt these behaviors. And how commonly do we use these similar behaviors in our relationships and our friendships as well. Um, yeah, so there it is. Very interesting. Another finding of the study was that there was strong associations with health risks and social outcomes across a person's lifespan if they had experienced child maltreatment. And some of these health risks include elevated risk of cancer, heart disease, respiratory disease like asthma, postnatal depression, anxiety, self harming behaviors, and even completing suicide. Um, and, the impact of child maltreatment has long lasting effects and also prompts maladaptive coping strategies. I have spoken about maladaptive coping in previous videos, which is basically unhealthy ways of dealing with certain issues we might be experiencing. And again, in terms of health risk, sexual and emotional abuse were both independently associated with higher rates of health risks than other types of maltreatment. So, towards the end of this study, the team noted that, of course, child maltreatment is associated with hefty mental health burden on, governments, society, and things like that. And in particular, sexual abuse and emotional abuse are especially very harmful. And while sexual abuse normally gets considerable attention, um, emotional abuse does not. And it's very widespread and it's hugely, hugely damaging and needs to be addressed. So the team concluded that these findings represent deep suffering. These findings, represent deep suffering, and of course they are disturbing because they obviously result from interpersonal harm to the most vulnerable people within our society, which is children who become adults. And they did call us to action that these findings deserve a closer attention in our relational world, in what we say to each other, to our children, how we say it, what we portray to them, how we relate to each other, what we're teaching them through that. Um, and that addressing these findings is a moral imperative and um, an economic necessity. It may require a change in political priorities, I hope it does, and social norms to promote safety and health for ourselves and our children. We do have a collective responsibility. There's no doubt about that. We need political will. We need public awareness and participation. We need parental engagement and also professional capacity to step forward for us to be able to address these issues and these findings as best as we can. And we must invest um, in more targeted in prevention of these issues because the benefits outweigh the short-term costs. Um, yeah, and on a more personal level, I guess for me, aside from the study, me bringing this study to your attention, if you hadn't heard of it, is my contribution to this call to action that the team at the Australian Child Maltreatment Study called for. I would love for us to talk more about this study in our homes and in our communities, um, and probably fitting to say that this study did fuel my conviction to bring these conversations out to the public. And I wish to keep doing this with intention and with the sensitivity that these issues deserve. I am very grateful to the whole team at the Australian Child Maltreatment Study for their work to bring us this study and for them sharing all of this knowledge. And in particular, I would like to really thank Professor Darrell Higgins who I have had the privilege of learning from multiple presentations, and he has shared his knowledge, vast knowledge in this area, and has brought this study to us in a few presentations in South Australia. Yeah, thank you for listening. I would love to hear your views, your reflections, and opinions about this study and these findings. Be well, take care of yourself. I know the content of this study was pretty heavy, so yeah, take care of yourself, and thank you again.